Welcome back to the Mail Right. Oh, sorry. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the Mail Right Show. We are incredibly fortunate to have an amazing guest with us today. Her name is Suzanne Tulien. She is the author of not one, but two amazing books on branding. The first one was written 10 years ago and was called Branding DNA, and her most recent book is called Personal Branding or Personal Brand. Did I get that right?
Personal Brand Clarity.
Personal Brand Clarity. We are very, very excited to have her on the show today and to continue our conversation about various ways to brand yourself. I talked a lot about branding yourself with a story, and I'm sure that Suzanne is going to give us a lot of amazing insights. So with no further ado, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to our viewers and our listeners?
Again, I'm Suzanne Tulien. I call myself a brand clarity expert. I'm an author, speaker, and consultant and trainer. So I like to help realtors, your audience, really leverage their wisdom, their expertise, and their personality to become what they want to be known for. So that's what this book is all about. It's the entire process. I pioneered a process called Brand DNA in 2010 from that original book that you mentioned. Mm-hmm. And I've crafted that that was for corporate America, but now this book, Personal Brand Clarity, is really written for the solopreneur, the person who is the brand of their book of business. And realtors certainly fall into that.
They certainly do. I'm also always overjoyed and grateful that many about 200 episodes or 100 episodes or whatever ago that the founder of MailRight, the founder of this show, found me and agreed to share the stage with me. His name is John. He's amazing. He's a WordPress expert. He's a multi-time entrepreneur. John, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience?
Oh, thank you, Robert. And I'm really looking forward to this discussion with Suzanne. I don't think there's any more time where if you're going to have a successful career in real estate where you need to build a personal brand. I think the agents in the next few years that don't do that have not really got a long-term career, but those that do will be highly successful. So I'm just really looking forward to Suzanne's views and tips and what she feels a real estate agent really has to do to build a really successful local brand. Back over to you, Robert.
Well, it's funny because I really quickly pulled up the index, and I was telling Suzanne before the show that I felt like I'd read her book or listened to her book years and years ago. I really do think that I did. I think I picked it up and actually read it. So I have not read your new book though. So for somebody like me who may already have run across you in the corporate world, can you differentiate the principles between your first book about branding and your second book about branding, just so that our audience understands the different directions that you went over the last decade?
Right. So when we started Brand Ascension, thank you, Robert. And I'm so glad you may have read the book. That's awesome. We pioneered this process called Brand DNA, which is a process for companies with employees to flush out core brand attributes that make up their value position. So again, it's just a process so that we can create a brand around the entity of the organization. And that's really what that book is focused on. And we infuse all of the outputs of the activities that are in that book, that process. We've infused that into their culture, their systems and processes, leadership, and the everything that the brand does. So it's an internal function. That's why it's DNA, because it's within the organization. And then the Personal Brand Clarity book is really, it's really close to the same process, but the language in it speaks to the solo professional. They don't have employees, right? They are the brand of their business solely. It's not an entity, so to speak, but they make those decisions. And it helps them flesh out certain attributes that keep them authentic, consistent, and distinctive as to who they are, so they can walk the talk and deliver on their promise every single day.
Okay. And so let's just pretend that we don't know who you are. What makes you an authority on brand?
Oh gosh, how many years have I been in doing this? I started in the marketing arena, marketing communications, advertising, graphic design. So I realized that, all of that messaging was certainly a function that was necessary to deliver the message, deliver the brand information. But what I saw that wasn't happening out there was the actual fact that when you're out there marketing a brand and you don't have a defining like profile of what that brand is, my question is to the client, what are you marketing, right? If you haven't done the work in defining that brand. So that's when I shifted and I realized that all I was doing with my marketing and my graphic design work was just putting lipstick on the pig, so to speak. And
Okay.
this just means that I'm putting a new coat of paint, and the client's expectation was that their business was going to grow from that activity, which isn't true, and that they really didn't understand or have a real clarity around who they were as a brand. So that's when I realized that there was a gap, right? They weren't taking the time to figure that out. And that's when I rolled into starting a process to help these people and these companies identify, define, and then align to who they were as a brand before they spent any more marketing dollars out there.
Okay.
So, being a pioneer of the methodology, I think helps make me an expert. I've got case after case after case of proven success from it, getting companies and people, solopreneurs, more conscious, strategic, and deliberate in how they go about doing what they do.
I have one follow-up question, and then I'm going to turn it over to my co-host, John, because I know that he was incredibly excited about meeting with you today, and I'm sure he has a long list of questions that he wants to ask. But I have a question that I am personally curious about.
Okay.
So we have been fortunate, John and I, to talk to lots of authors and amazing people that deal with the concept of story. You're calling it brand, I'm going to call it story, but it's really the same thing. The story of a company, the story of a person, whatever it is. I'm curious to know that you, as a person that lives and breathes and eats in this field, tell me, who do you personally look at and go, that company or person has just hit a grand slam with their brand?
Well, there's several of them. One I've been following for a long, long time is Tony Robbins. He is still the sole kind of owner of his own conglomerate brand because he is infused into everything that his Tony Robbins company does. And so that's huge. People that have made a name for themselves and have stayed consistent with walking the talk and delivering on their promise. And in that same breath, we've got people that have made it to celebrity status who have fallen off of that realm, have stopped being consistent for one reason or another, who have said that they are something, and then something happens one day and everybody realizes that's not what they thought they were, right?
Right.
I don't know if I want to name names, but we all understand, that's when you're in the celebrity arena, you have to really be more conscious of how you show up. So it's really all those people that, someone that I would choose could be different than what you choose. It just depends on what your filters are and what you lean into in terms of what you trust.
Okay. And so there's really only one brand that you named. Is there another that you could, like, I was talking about somebody who's hit a home run. I will avoid, as well as you, like talking about people that have fallen off their brand game. But is there anybody else that stayed on their brand game that you like, that you personally like? I'm not talking about, the world. I'm talking about you, Suzanne. Who else is it that you look at and you go, God, they do a good job?
Mm-hmm. Wow. The common ones like Oprah or Marie Forleo and those types of people are pretty they're doing a really good job at serving the way they're promising they're serving. Elon Musk, he is a brand in and of himself, of course, right? And
Right.
He is pretty conscious, strategic, and deliberate in being Elon. He doesn't let things phase him. He doesn't let Bad reviews shake him. He just is what he is, right? I could just keep going on.
No. Those were great examples. I wanted to get a feel for what your vision of good branding was. So with that, John, I have really taken up a lot of more time than I intended to. So why don't you go ahead and get into it?
On a more scale, because obviously these are like Eon and some of the other people you mentioned, they are mega personalities, but on a more, maybe a more reachable, are there any kind of real estate agents that have come on your radar through all your teaching and consultancy? Any, if not, it doesn't have to be real estate agents, but if they are, that'd be great. That have come on your radar that you think have done a really good job of branding themselves local, and if so, what were some of the key things that you think they were doing right, Suzanne?
Well, we have several here locally in town that are making a name for themselves, of course, on TV, right? So I really want to also make sure we understand the difference between branding and marketing, because I think your audience needs to understand those two functions. And I feel like we keep going into the marketing side of it. And I really want to stay on the brand side, because that's where my expertise is. I mean, we can market all day long and still not have a very good brand, because a brand is about consistency. It's about delivering on the promise. It's about being authentic.
Well, can I just interrupt you? You're so right, because before I was thinking of asking you a slightly different question to the one, and that was my experience of corporate America, because because it is a very effective way of increasing profitability. So most of corporate America is obsessed with brands. So they have all these brand, on message training for employees, blah 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 blah. But then I tend to observe that everybody in the organisation plays along with it, but there's also the real brand. There's the actual real essence of the business, and in a lot of occasions the two don't match. But I feel very rapidly in the next few years, those that don't match what they try and project to the reality of what they are going to have some problems.
You're absolutely right, Jonathan. And that's what I call cognitive dissonance or cognitive resonance. And when we're not matching the marketing messaging with how we're actually creating the customer experience or the transactional experience, if it's two different things, then you're breaking down trust and you're not building trust through consistency. So that's one of the biggest problems I think solopreneurs have, is that they're trying so hard to be like what they see around them, that everybody ends up doing the same thing, and their brands become diluted in the market, and they become a commodity in the minds of their audiences, right? So I know 50 to 100 real estate agents in just my circle of influence. I do a lot of training for them and coaching with them. But if I were to find somebody that I need to refer someone to, knowing that person and knowing how they deliver on what they say they are delivering on is important for me to make that referral. Otherwise, they're just, a dime a dozen out there, because they're not creating distinction. They're all trying to do and market the same way as each other are marketing, and it just isn't working.
Well, I think we're going to go for our break, Robert, and then we come back and we can because I want to know how you do it the right way. So I think this is a great time to go for our break, Robert.
Sure. All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, real estate agents of all places in their career. We're going to be right back. So grab your notepads, grab your pens. We're going to ask Suzanne to get into some specifics about how you build the brand. Stay tuned. 3, 2, 1. We're back with Suzanne Tulien, and we are on episode number 287, I think, of the Mail Right podcast. We've been talking about brand. The topics that we've covered so far is Suzanne was kind enough to share with us some examples of people that she thought was doing great brand. She separated the distinction about marketing versus branding and a little bit of dissonance between the two. And now we're going to ask her some questions. John is going to get right back into asking her some questions about how would you go about building a personal brand. So over to you, John.
So I think what you said before we went for the break was really important. But the nitty gritty of those people in your local market that you think are doing an effective job, are there some things that link them all together? Is there a pattern that you could share with our audience, even though they are individuals and they've got their individual brand? Is there, obviously that's what your book is about, a quasi process to achieving that individuality of brand, is it not?
Yes, it is. And it's, let me just say that there's good news and bad news. The good news is that every single person already has a brand, right? The bad news is that everyone already has a brand. So what that means is the real question is are you in control of it? Because a brand, all a brand is a perception. So we give off perceptions all the time, and people are perceiving us in different ways all the time. But are we cognizant of it? Are we conscious, strategic, and deliberate in our actions and behaviors and how we actually show up and showcase who we are? And when you're out there marketing, you're marketing the brand, right? Remember? And if we're disseminating information about a brand we have not yet defined yet, all we're doing is chasing the audience instead of a poll style, which is really revealing who you are and what you're promising to deliver on that very individual scale. And so what makes a good brand great are people who are authentically showing up, true to their core brand style attributes, core values. They know what makes them different, and they are true to delivering on what they're promising from the get-go, and not just talking about in their marketing messaging about selling a house or buying, helping someone buy a house, but really getting into who they are and those attributes that distinguish them from the next guy. And you guys were talking about this the other day on your Brand Story podcast. This is all about that uniqueness that you bring to the table. What are your superpowers? What is your area of expertise? If you are just an organizing, crazy nut and you just love numbers and you love organization, then you can really begin to leverage that in your brand in terms of how organized you are in the process of buying a house. You know what I mean? Your vernacular changes when you're clear on what attributes you can bring to the table. And that's really the content for all your messaging.
Rightio. So how could you apply it clearly to the example? So you got these individual real estate agents, and they're all got different backgrounds. They come from different histories, different areas of business. How do they clarify what are their individual strengths and the ones that would be interested to their audience, which are selling and buying of houses?
So that's a big question, but the process is in the book, and it's really about fleshing out what those core values are, identifying and defining those. When I say define, I want the realtor to really define how they show up valuing that particular value. And so that's in their actions and behaviors. And when I experience that as a customer, as a prospect, then I'm seeing what they value through those actions and behaviors and through their narrative and how they're even marketing themselves. So it's very, it's again, everybody's so individual at what they can bring to the table based on their own expertise, and knowing that No brand is universal, that you're not going to capture everyone. Not everyone is your market. And when you begin to leverage those things that you have superpowers around, that you just lean into, then you're going to start attracting those customers, those prospects that believe what you believe. This is typical Simon Sinek, right? They buy what you believe. They don't buy what you do, because I can get that 10,000 other places. A prospect is your perfect market, perfect client, when they can buy into what you believe. And until you reveal that, or even uncover that for yourself so that you can reveal it, it's a crapshoot on who you take on as a customer.
Right. Do you want to ask a question, Robert, or can I ask another one?
You can ask another one. I have plenty, but please keep going. If you whatever you want, John. I took up a lot of time to start the show.
Yeah. So have you got any insights on how agents should treat the tricky relationship, which is the norm in most states, between broker and agent, between the agent needing, if they're going to be effective and have a real long-term career, building brand, and what the brokerage is about, which is building their own brand. How, got any insights about what the agent should understand about that?
Well, the clearer they are, I think that's a great question, Jonathan. The clearer they are on who they are, the more satisfied they will be when they join an organization, the broker, right? The organization that has that same set of core values, or nearly the same set of core values. So the first thing to do is make sure you understand what you're getting yourself into, know what that culture is, know what that value position is of the brokerage you're going into, and know yourself enough to know if it's a good fit. Because oftentimes that's where the relationships start to dissolve, as we realize that they got themselves into a position or an organization that isn't a good fit, that doesn't espouse the same values.
Yeah, it's really, yeah, I was going to say that was obvious, but actually it's very insightful, isn't it? You can see when you don't follow that why things rapidly go pear-shaped, can't you? Because let's say you're an agent that really loves the technology and loves to be on the edge of using technology in your real estate business, and you join a very sleepy, very established brokerage that doesn't really value technology. That's not going to really work, is it?
Not at all. So values and the brand style attributes, which is also an exercise in the book, helps you really understand your core personality. And if you can mesh that personality with the brokerage that you're considering joining, then that's even more powerful. You're solidifying resonating, attributes that you can then grow from and exponentially grow from within that organization. But you've got to do your own due diligence, and you've really got to pay attention. I keep saying the three words: conscious, strategic, and deliberate, because we are not conscious enough today. We are not strategic enough, and we are not deliberate enough about how we show up, because we are being so externally impacted by our external environments, and we lose the ability to be more internally driven. And when we're not internally driven, we make bad choices, and we discern a lot differently.
Well, I'm going to throw it. I'm just going to remark and then throw it over to Robert, because we got about another 5-6 minutes of the podcast. Hopefully, you're going to stay on for bonus content.
Sure.
But just as I think it was linked to what you previously said earlier on, Suzanne, is that a lot of agents, they want to appeal to everybody. And I see that so much. And by wanting to appeal to everybody, they appeal to nobody.
Exactly.
They just, like you say, just become a commodity. They just become, and I said last week, like in Northern Nevada, there's about 12 agents that I feel really know what they're up to and know their craft. But of those 12, there's over half of them I wouldn't work with, not because I don't think they actually understand the mechanics of selling a house or helping somebody buy one. It's just that their personalities don't resonate with me. And being it's a major one is for most people, their major purchase of their life, I don't particularly want to work with somebody that I don't resonate with.
And you don't have to.
No, you don't have to. Over to you, Robert.
Well, I'm gonna. So strangely enough, I was probably as a follow-up to our podcast last week. I've been doing a deep dive into reading some books and listening to some books all about not so much brand, but like the concept of working with people that basically relate to your core values. And that could be a principle as a business owner and entrepreneur. And one of the books that I recently was picking up, and I was trying to find it on my phone, and I couldn't, because I have so many books in my library. I've already read like another 3, and I couldn't remember the name. But anyway, the guy that did the book was somebody that was part of the PayPal mafia. Don't know if either one of you ever heard of this, but it's basically a group of guys that were working at PayPal, of which Elon Musk was one. But while nobody has moved on to be as famous as Elon, this group of guys have all moved on to do insane things. There's about 13 major companies that have come out of the same group of workers that originally helped get PayPal off the ground. Here's what he said. It kind of relates to personal branding, I think. That's why I'm throwing it in the show. And I just want to hear what you think, Suzanne. So what he said was, even when you're working in larger internal, like large companies, maybe people that like companies that have thousands of people, or it could be a small real estate team, it doesn't really matter. Align yourself with team members that have the same core values and interests. That's what he was essentially saying. Like, align yourself with those people, because creatively, you're going to work much, much better with that group of people, a group of people that kind of has the same mission, or at least the same creative fabric that you do, because oftentimes pushing and pulling against people inside organizations it's not that they're bad people. They just may not be wired quite the same way that you are. So oftentimes you find yourself creating friction and resistance based on a differentiation in personality types. And I just kind of want to see what you thought about that.
Well, I think to some extent that's very true if you want to move fast, because you've got everybody on board who thinks like you think, right? But you also have to be careful about groupthink and being stuck in a bubble and, not being able to step outside of the box. And it's really the antagonist or the catalyst in the group that doesn't think like you think that could kind of steer it in a different direction that you may never have thought of before. So there's a couple of different, boundaries and things you need to think about. Maybe you start a project with a bunch of people of like-minded, like values, and then you pull in a few people to review and give feedback that maybe don't have the same values, just to get a different perspective. Because if, that's how we grow. And if you guys are all about innovation, right? You've got, at some point you want to have that outside focus, provide some level of feedback so that you can think twice about something, tweak something, and see what's at the next generation of that thought.
Got you. I kind of agreed with that, though. I think that you hit the nail on the head in the first part of your statement. The challenge I've always found with tech, I don't think that people outside of tech understand the breakneck pace that you are trying to innovate at or create at. Like a developer who's creating something in a year, and John can attest to this, that is like lightning speed. Like, you are doing so much work to take an idea from fruition to market. You don't really have the same kind of time frame that other people think that you have in order to hear contrary ideas. Like, tech is really weird, because if you get stopped or slowed down, you really can get derailed in a very major kind of way. So I was just curious to see what you thought. I'm a little bit on the fence. I think you're right, but at the same time, I also understand exactly what the author was trying to communicate when he was saying work with like-minded teams. And I don't think necessarily he was trying to infer that somebody wouldn't disagree, but I think that everybody having the same core values, like, here's a value. we can innovate as much as we want, but somebody is footing the $100 million bill. We better get a product to market as soon as possible.
I actually think you're both singing from the same song sheet. I think you're right what you just said, and Susanna was just pointing out, as long as they have at their heart, they're going the end result, they're going on the same journey. You don't just want people that disagree with you all the time. There must be some, because in that disagreement, there's a creative process, isn't it? But we need to go to wrap up the podcast parts show, Robert, and then Susanna seems up to doing some bonus content with us.
Absolutely.
So here's what we're going to look at. Suzanne, if you're up for it, the last 10 minutes of the show are going to be on YouTube alone. So for those of you who would like to see our beautiful faces, we're going to invite you to go over to the MailRight YouTube channel and do that. Suzanne, if you're comfortable with it, we've talked a lot about general things, and I just kind of enjoyed getting your thoughts about the bigger brand concepts. But at the end of these last 10 minutes, if you could say specifically a couple of very direct tips for a solo real estate agent. Do you think you could contribute something in the last 10 minutes of the show?
I think so.
Okay, lovely. So listen, everybody, thank you so much for joining the show. For those of you who are only going to tune into the podcast, Suzanne, how would you like those people to look you up?
I have a website, brandascension.com, and I have an online course for the solopreneur that I built last year. And it's at personalbrandpresence.com. It's an awesome video self-directed course that has a little bit of me in there, a downloadable workbook, and it'll walk you right through every step of the way.
Wonderful. So I love free content. For those of you listening to the show, I hope you took that down and you go check it out. John, if somebody wanted to reach out to you and see what you're doing with the MailRight lead generation system that leverages the power of Facebook. I'm just stealing your language right out from underneath you. How would they go about doing that?
First of all, I want to say, don't worry. The links to everything Suzanne has just mentioned will be in the show notes with the video, with the everything on the MailRight website. So I will make sure that those links are there, folks. And about MailRight, well, I think we got a fantastic system, really great value aimed at the real estate agent, the individual or the agent in a small group. Go over to MailRight. You can book a free demo. That demo and also a free consultation is done by me. It's half hour. I think even if you decided, and I'll be amazed, if you decided not to go with MailRight, you would still get great value from that consultation. Over to you, Robert.
Lovely. And if anybody would like to figure out how to do real estate content marketing, inbound marketing, all story-based marketing, all those things, you can find that all for free. I have tons and tons of posts and videos on my site, which is inboundrem.com. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. We'll catch you on the flip side. For those of you who are going to join us on YouTube, we'll see you in a second. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the MailRight Show video edition. We're still here with Suzanne Tulien. We have just wrapped up our podcast. We talked about all sorts of brilliant things. If you haven't already done so, please go over to iTunes and download the show. This show is number 287. Suzanne is going to give us some great tips. If you're an individual agent, we're going to focus these last 10 minutes on you and what you can potentially do to start figuring out what your personal brand is, or maybe developing around. I don't know. I honestly don't know what Suzanne's going to say. So Suzanne, over to you.
Well, so let me just run through some of the steps of the process. I think that's probably the most important thing to do. And then the unique activities within the book or the online course will really help them flesh that out. But again, as we mentioned in the podcast earlier, it's really about identifying your core values. And these are only 4 or 5 at the most core values that really you lean into. You find yourself wanting to surround yourself around people that have these core values. You find yourself leaning into, let's say, one of my core values is spontaneity. right? I get super excited when things are happening and they're very spontaneous. And I just lean into taking those types of fun risks. You can come up with so many different core values that you have, but you've got to narrow those down. And then the recipe to really understanding your values is defining them. Again, defining them so that you show up in the space of that core value in your actions and behaviors. That's how we make things tangible in our customer delivery, our customer onboarding, right? How we even go search for prospects or we're prospecting. We can discern differently with that kind of information when we're clear on what those core values are. The second piece to the brand DNA process is identifying and defining your brand style attributes. And these attributes are really about your personality. What are these adjectives that make you who you are? And again, only 4 or 5 of those. When you really do this and you flush these out and they resonate with you to be authentic, things start changing because you start getting more conscious of these attributes, and then you start stepping into them and showing up more as them. Instead of being so manipulated by our external environment, you become more true to who you say you are. And that's when your vibration raises and your energy rises and everything just starts manifesting for you in that way, just because it's the way the universe works. So again, I can't really explain enough how important it is to stop the marketing until you begin defining your brand, so that your marketing dollars work smarter for you and harder for you, because you're marketing then distinctive things that you've come up with identifying within your brand's presence or your brand DNA.
So you've identified, so you gave us a personal example, and obviously since John and I do the show, I think that people have started to figure out pretty closely what our personal brands are, his and mine, which are similar but different at the same time. So I'm just curious, spontaneity is one for you. Mm-hmm. If you were to define your own personal brand, just to try to lock in the lesson that you're trying to teach, mm-hmm. What would that be? Give me a couple more examples of how you define your personal brand, so maybe people who've watched the show can say, oh, I understand.
So my personal brand is summed up with all those attributes. After doing the work, you sum it all up with what I call a brand mantra, mm-hmm. and then a brand promise. So the mantra is a tool that I can use to bring myself back into alignment when I get out of whack, or I start feeling like I'm not in full alignment and authentic with who I am. And mine is consciousness, inspiration, growth. So mm-hmm. that's what I stand for. I stand for it in my business. I stand for it for myself. I stand for it with my friends, community, and my family, right? So that is my core value position that I can bring to the table. And of course, there's a lot of detail and pieces of that and how I go about doing that. But I'm really all about, I am the consultant, the brand consultant that brings about consciousness, provides inspiration, and enables you to grow through that.
Gotcha.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's a great example. Thank you. John, you sounded like you were about ready to tee something up.
Well, it's just like it was linked with the last bit of the podcast, Suzanne. So many agents, and we were discussing it, the brokerage model in Northern Nevada, there's about 3 to 4 national franchisees, but Northern Nevada is dominated by 3 regional agencies, brokerages, and they use a very traditional regional brokerage model of flooding the market with part-time real estate agents that might get between 3 to 7 transactions per year. And then there's about, out of those, I would say, of those 3 brokerages, all 3 of them have between 400 to 600 agents on their books. And of that, 10% are what I would call real agents. And I'm not trying to be disparaging here, but really are in the process of trying to build their own business, their own brand. And I just want to see if you agree. I know this has been a little bit long-winded, but just adopting, which understandable reasons, the brokerage just wants you to use the website that they provide. They just want you to utilize the tools, the digital marketing tools, which they provide. But that leads to you not having a brand, doesn't it? It just makes you kind of just a service provider, does it not?
Yeah, if there's no means for them to do any customization of some of those marketing tools to really infuse their own personality within those tools, then yeah, you are just a service provider. And you espouse, by agreeing to work for that organization, you're espousing to those core values, right? In that particular brand. So you're kind of molding yourself within that space. But I think that no matter what, everybody has their own personality. So at some level, that personality does shine through, it may or may not through the marketing, but once they get into the actual transaction and working with human beings, there's definitely perceptions flying all over the place. And those perceptions are good, bad, or indifferent, depending on the brand they're working with, the personal brand they're working with. So it's up to them at that point to ensure that they're treating that customer in a very authentic, consistent, and distinctive way in accordance to their personal brand. But that customer will want to refer them after that. Right. So it's a cognizant thing. It's about integrity and delivering on what they're saying they promise. But there's always opportunities to customize how people perceive you, whether you're tied into.
Just to finish off, the amazing thing, Susanna, is that there's never been more opportunity at reasonable price levels to brand yourself through YouTube, through social media, for digital. It's just the ability to do it, the opportunities to do it. I've never been, with an iPhone, you've just got a bit of equipment that enables you to take fantastic video, to be a kind of centralized marketing machine. But I've just observed there's so few agents that seem to be really up for taking the opportunities that are out there. Do you think it's just lack of knowledge and also just fear?
So what was the question then?
Why so many agents aren't doing a great job?
Aren't doing it. Well, I want to address what you had said right at the beginning of this question first, and that was that there's lots of free opportunities for you to brand yourself. So all of those channels that you mentioned, I actually consider those as marketing channels. Right. Because they're actually just disseminating information about the brand. The brand work is the assignment of meaning to yourself and how you're going to be showing up. So when you do that branded piece, you're actually taking a step back from marketing and you're figuring that out so that when you market yourself, you are showing up authentically with a unique value, position, and message. So I wanted just to clarify that first. And I think that the answer to your question, in my opinion, in regards to their fear, is just like the fear of speaking. It's glossophobia is the term for the fear of speaking. And that's really about fearful of messing up, being embarrassing yourself, being judged, right? That's all it is. But I want to tell your agents and your audience that the more clear you are on who you are, the more confident you are. So the reason why you're fearful is because you're not that clear on who you are and how you show up.
I want to add something here, John. I want to throw in, and maybe we wrap up on this note, but for all those people watching and all those people listening, well, there won't be that many of those, but listen, I want to say something here, which is, Suzanne may or may not be aware of this, but the real estate marketing market has heated up to the point that people spending large amounts of money are having a hard, like even if you get 10 buyers right now, you may very well not actually be able to sell anything. So right now, there's just the real estate marketing industry is quite literally in a place I haven't seen it for well over a decade. And so what we are talking about today is the solution to that problem. The one thing that has not changed, the one thing in my opinion that will not change, is that if somebody somehow connects into, and Suzanne has had a lot of really amazing and clarifying language. I am calling it your personal story. It's your personal brand. And there's all sorts of like mechanics to get to that personal brand. And you should read or listen to her to figure that out. But if you have that, or if you're willing to put that online, if you're willing to display that, my experience with my customers is that they are still doing really good business, even in this insane market, because you will never lose the power of somebody connecting into your message so completely that they will put up with all the market conditions in order to do business with you personally. It can happen. It does happen. And in my opinion, while it's been something you should do for a long time, at this point, in this particular part of the market, it's really something that you need to do. It's not something you should do. You need to do it. If you're going to survive, do it.
I call that personal brand equity.
There you go. There you go. John, is there anything you want to add as we close this out?
Suzanne has been very generous with her time. Let's wrap it up, Robert.
All right. So listen, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Suzanne, you've been an amazing guest. Thank you so very much for coming on to the show. John and I really appreciate it from the bottom of our hearts. One last thing for our people watching us on YouTube, do us a favor, please. We work really hard on the show, especially John. It's his YouTube channel. I have my own YouTube channel. I would love it if you would do John the courtesy of giving these videos a thumbs up or a comment in the comments. He works so hard on this stuff. And with that, with no further ado, tune in next time. Bye. Or did I miss something, John?